Hey everybody, welcome back to This Old Trike. Today, we've got Curtie Eldredge in the house. We're going to do a carburetor tutorial. We're going to go over a bunch of things. The basics, the Venturi effect, basic principles of how a carburetor works. We want to talk about some variations of Honda carburetors that you'll find on a lot of the different models. Specifically, ATCs is where we're going to focus. Some of the differences, some of the similarities. Tuning basics, just we're not going to get nitty gritty, just some tuning basics, common mistakes, things to avoid, maybe some troubleshooting. One thing Curtie mentioned was describing a lean bog versus a rich bog scenario, and whatever else we pop up, we're going to do some carb talk with the man Curtie Eldredge. Hey guys, thanks for watching. So I'm here with Curtie. We've got a smattering of carburetors. Nothing super pretty, just whatever I had extra, but this covers, your big red 250s, 250SX, 350X, your smaller machines, your 185s, 200Ss, even on down to 110s and 90s are different, I guess, but 250R carburetors, and then some more modern stuff, 300EX or 400EX. It's got a accelerator pump put in it, but as we said in the beginning, we want to talk about some carburetor basics. All of them operate under pretty much the same principles, and that is the Venturi effect. So just like if you had a cold drink and you had a straw and you blow air across the straw, you can watch the liquid rise in that straw. That's the Venturi effect.
And how big is that straw?
Exactly.
Bigger straw, smaller straw?
Yeah. How fast are you blowing? It is... There's my cat. So anyway, as that relates to carburetors, we have air passing from your air box over here into your motor over here. It's a cone, basically. You called this what when we talked about it before? The bell?
The intake bell.
The intake bell. So it is forcing that air down, and that increases speed?
Yeah, well, it'll be choked a little more here in the center than it will be even towards the engine side. So kind of out and then up, almost like an hourglass.
Yes. Where your slide is.
Mm-hmm.
So when that air rushes past, basically these are your straws. You've got your pilot circuit and main circuit. And sometimes there's a third circuit. We'll let Curtie talk about that later. But when your machine's idling, it's taking air. You were describing this to me. I don't want to goof it up. You tell me. It's taking air from a different spot when it's idling.
Right. So when your slide's all the way down and you're at idle, pretend this is a nice little intake hole for your pilot circuit. A little bit of air will come in through here. It'll be directed. There'll be kind of events. The carb is a lot like a heart. There's a lot of circuits and everything that run through the carburetor. So air will come directly past the pilot jet or pilot circuit and come out a little hole on the engine side, and that's what kind of controls your idle to third throttle.
So on this, it's these tubes, right? This is your 250R carburetor. You got these right tubes down here. Now where is it on this guy? Oh, right down here. I was looking at it backwards.
Well,
I'm upside down.
So on this carburetor, which you'll find on the 250 Big Reds, 350X, TRX 250s, 350Ds, it actually comes in right here. And the ports are up here, so it kind of sucks air in through here. You can see on the sides where those circuits come down into the pilot jet or main jet or primary jet.
Wow. Okay. So when it's idling, it's getting air from a different location, and it's just sipping the fuel. And so that's why this one barely touches. Right.
Well, yeah, your pilot jet will sit higher than your main jet. It's just kind of set at the level of the fuel. And think of it as, like a gas stove or a gas range. You have that pilot, that little pilot.
Mm-hmm.
You're not operating your stove, but you still have that pilot lit. And that's exactly what a pilot circuit does. It just keeps enough fuel to keep that engine running at idle up to third throttle. Now, it doesn't shut off. Once you start lifting the slide and you pull the throttle and it starts sucking up some fuel through the main jet here to get into the Venturi, This is still supplying fuel.
Okay.
So it's going to supply fuel through the whole rev range, but it's just going to be a metered fuel, just a set amount. Whereas the more you lift the slide, the more fuel comes through the main jet circuit.
So as you start to give it throttle and your slide raises up, open it, the needle, there's space that opens up around the needle, so it starts to drink and suck fuel from there.
Yeah, and it atomizes, so it mixes with air.
Yep.
Right here in the venturi. So the venturi is actually this section right here. So as you lift the slide kind of in your mid range, because the main needle is kind of cutting off the main jet. So it's kind of allowing a little more and a little more and a little more as you lift it through the main jet until it's just all the way up and it's all main jet. And it kind of comes up here, circulates around, and as that air gets sucked in, it mixes with the air to shoot it into the engine.
Cool. So that's really the basics. The only other thing that's coming to mind is, this is our float down here. So this is our needle valve. This would be connected to your gas line coming in. So as your float goes down, the needle valve goes down and lets fuel in. As it rises, it seals up. It's got that rubber tip on the needle valve.
And this level here is as important as what jet you're running. So if our level is too high, that is going to force too much fuel, prematurely through the pilot jet. And this is a situation, especially in a two-stroke. If we've got the idle screw cranked all the way in and it's barely idling, that means your float level is too high. It might not be high enough to where it's coming out the overflow and it's flooding out, but it's too high, kind of causing that premature rich condition. Or if it's too low, like if you shut the gas off on your tank, right, and you're draining carb out, right before it dies, it idles way up. That's because the level drops down so much that it leans it out. So the level of your fuel is very important. Now, a lot of your floats, especially like this float right here, isn't adjustable. It's all plastic. So it's not an adjustable float. So that kind of takes the guesswork out of where our float level needs to be, right? But then we have guys like this that's got a tab on it. And some people, you'll find that if their float needle gets worn and it's not sealing and it's kind of flooding, they'll bend this tab to put a little more pressure. But the problem with that is when you bend that tab, you're lowering the level of fuel in your bowl. So you're kind of creating an overall lean condition.
That makes a lot of sense.
And if you're wondering about where my float level needs to be, you measure it from here with the carburetor, with the float just resting on the float close, not pushing down. So it's just resting there. So we're going to take a measurement from here to here. And depending on which carb, it's going to be a different measurement. Of course, you can go on our website if you have, like this guy right here, PJ03A. So that tells me it's 1986 ATC 250R carb. You can go to the Identify My Carb section, select the PJ series carb, select the 03A. That'll tell you all the specs, including the float height that it should be at.
Okay. And you measure to the lowest point because this float tapers down. So we measure to the lowest point?
To this point right here.
Okay.
So to the top. So we're going to kind of put it at an angle like this to where the float is just resting, just seated. And then you'll measure from the body line to the top here.
Yeah. Something I never think about. I'm just a hack when it comes to this. Okay. Some carburetors, this might be a good time to switch. Like we were talking about, we were working on a 250R carburetor, which has an air mixture screw, versus a 250 ES Big Red and 350X. They have a fuel mixture screw.
And your PD series, so your 185s, 200s have a fuel screw. So what makes an air screw? What makes a fuel screw? It all depends on what side of the carburetor it's on. So if we're on the airbox side, this becomes an air screw. So what we're adjusting is how much air gets put into that pilot circuit. So
this is only for idle.
Well, idle to third throttle, but it does control the whole rev range because remember your pilot is still feeding. Even if you're wide open throttle, your pilot's still feeding. So the air screw you're cutting off or adding air to compensate the size of pilot jet you have. Now, if it's like on these guys, our mixture screw is here on the engine side. If it's here on the engine side, it's a fuel screw. So we're not adjusting the amount of air coming through the circuit. We're adjusting the amount of fuel allowed through the circuit. So if we're bringing the air screw out, we're adding air. But on the fuel screw, if we're bringing the fuel screw out, or the mixture screw, we're adding fuel to compensate for the air that's coming through the circuit.
He was pointing out to me, this is the engine side on a big red carburetor.
Need a little pointer.
You see that dot? I'll put a circle around it on the video. That is the port where your adjustment, which is here, where the fuel's coming through. Versus, can we see it on the 250R carburetor?
Yes, a little better because it's kind of at an angle. It's on the other side, on your engine side. Where it's coming out.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that little...
So you're adjusting it on the back, but it's coming
right
out.
there in the center behind the main needle.
Yeah.
And you can see your mixture screw here. This is actually a needle.
Yeah, that's tapered, so that's what's doing the work.
It's a metering needle, just like the main needle is. So the main needle is exactly like your mixture needle.
So when I get these in the rebuild kits, I don't put this part in. You know, these don't wear out, do they?
Oh, yeah.
Huh. So this is important, and you probably have to use all the O-rings that come in the kit.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. And the
because
springs.
there's a spring, and then the O-ring, or there's a spring, then there's a washer, then the O-ring. So the O-ring helps kind of seal where the seat's up in here, and it kind of helps seal so you're not getting any extra air coming up around to mess up your mixture there.
You have a YouTube, right? Did you do any?
Sorta.
Did you do any rebuild videos?
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna put links to Curtie's rebuild videos in there.
And I need to do a lot better about that. It's a goal this year is to actually kind of crack down and do more carbs, because we've done really detailed video on this style carburetor, the QA, you know, and how to adjust the linkage timing and all that fun stuff.
But as a hack, as I have described myself. You get these kits and you're like, man, there's a lot of parts in here I didn't realize. And sometimes he was pointing out things to me, that aspects of the carburetor that I didn't even understand or know about. So from a point of ignorance, you can think you are rebuilding a carburetor and missing some very key components of it. So
one of the biggest thing that a lot of people don't replace and they should replace every time is under the you got the main jet and main jet holder that holds your main jet. But under that, and it's kind of hard to see, but what the needle goes into, this little brass piece sticking up through the venturi, is a needle jet. And those wear out because your needle is constantly, it's going up and down, right? So you're going up and down, and it's just brass. It's your needles are typically brass. Your needle jet is brass. Right. So it just working back and forth. What happens is that needle jet will egg out. And a lot of people like not to replace that or don't know to replace that. And those all come in the kits. You definitely want to replace that along with the main needle, because those are probably the most wear items in the carburetor.
And it's probably the most not replaced.
It's probably the most not replaced.
And I think you were telling me about those before, and you say you just got to gingerly, with a screwdriver, press that down.
Well, I like to use like a straight pick. Okay. Because if you try to use a screwdriver, what happens is, see, that is really thin.
Yeah. You
kind of swedge it out, and then it's going to make it a lot harder to get out.
But a straight pick.
So a straight pick
from the top.
So
pull your slide mechanism.
Yeah, you put a pick down there and just kind of tap it with a hammer, pop it right out. And a lot of times you know, if a bit stubborn.
Yeah.
use some heat.
Yeah.
You know, if you got a little propane torch or a butane torch, throw a little heat in there. Not so much that we're melting the cast aluminum. We don't want to do that, but a little bit of heat because it'll kind of solidify all the gunk and varnish that is around the main jet, and it'll help ease it right on out.
My cat is an active part of this video today, so if you see
really
us looking around, he's... I don't know where he went. Anyway.
He's looking for Vinny.
Okay, so back to our list. We talked about the Venturi effect. We talked about some differences, but in our basics, you know, the similarities are these
all
circuits.
carbs are going to act exactly the same. All these carbs, you're going to have a main jet, you're going to have a pilot jet, and you're going to have a mixture screw, whether that mixture screw is an air screw or whether it's a fuel screw.
One difference you mentioned the other day was this is a QA carburetor, so Big Red 250SX, TRX 250, 350X would be the same 350, 350D 4x4. So this has an extra circuit on it. So
the 250ES Big Red and the 250SX will have this primary circuit. This extra little bitty jet all the way up to the front closest to your fuel screw or mixture screw. That is kind of it's a transition jet. So it's a jet that in between the pilot and the main, it feeds some fuel to help that transition go between. Now, we all know that notoriously they have a stab ball problem. Yeah. So does it help? Obviously, it probably doesn't help all that much.
Yeah.
But then in every other machine that this QA body is used in, TRX 250, which is funny, is it's the identical carb. There's no difference between this carb and a TRX 250 carb except for this primary circuit's blocked off. The 350X doesn't have the primary circuit. The 350D, only the Big Red and the SX has this primary circuit, and really for the most part only the ES and SX are plagued with the stab bog problem. You know, if you give it a bunch of throttle and it just...
Do you think it's because the people that ride three-wheelers want to do that to pop wheelies and they're just overall rowdier than the quad crowd?
Possibly. Nobody's ever kind of dialed in why it has that stab bog. I mean, some do, some don't. Some worse than others. Some, you give it some quick throttle and it will just completely die. It won't recover.
Weird. Okay. Common mistakes when we look at that. One thing I'll mention, because I'm guilty of this, and you should have seen Curtie's face when I told him that I've done this in the past. We were talking about the needle valves here, which has a rubber tip that seats in a brass fitting.
There's a tapered seat at the bottom.
Tapered seat. And those can get not corroded, but build up.
Varnished and oxidized.
And you can use a Q-tip and some compound to polish those and make them... That's the proper way to do it. I don't have Q-tips, and I've got some compound over there, but sometimes you don't have the Q-tips handy because you haven't stolen them from your wife out of the bathroom. So what I do have handy is a drill bit and some steel wool. Now, this is wrong. We're saying don't do this, but I'd put steel wool on the drill bit and just between my fingers. To go way wrong, you'd put that in a drill, and then you ruin your carburetor, and you have to send it to Curtie and spend a few dollars, to say the least, to have that repaired, if it's even
because
repaired.
Those seats aren't replaceable.
They're not replaceable. So if you want to screw up your carb permanently, do that. But the proper way to do that would cure a condition where your carburetor's overflowing, just because it's letting a little fuel by, so you come out and there's a little puddle underneath. But,
you want, when you're cleaning the carb, you want that good and polished. You know, you can use some steel wool on a Q-tip. You can use some good metal polish, like a Mother's Mag aluminum polish works really great. Valve grinding compound, put it in a drill, put it in reverse, and just kind of up and down all around and hold it in the center there. Just some slight pressure. We're not trying to drill through the thing, right? So we're just trying to get it good and polished up so it'll create a good seal.
So that is a common mistake that I probably have been guilty of. Tell us about the lean bog, rich bog.
Well, lean bog, rich bog, a lot of people kind of get it backwards. Your rich bog will almost like you're hitting a rev limiter. It won't completely die out. It won't just quit. It'll just kind of, you just kind of have that back and forth. Mm-hmm. Where a lean bog just completely cuts out. So like a stab bog. A stab bog is a lean issue. And it's not so much the jetting. That is because a lot of sudden throttle. It opens up the slide and the butterfly all at once. Lets a high volume of air in all at the same time. There's nowhere really for it to go because the valve train hasn't caught up. Right. Mm-hmm. So all this air, you got an 8-lane interstate, all of a sudden goes down to a 2-lane interstate, then the air slows. Stops, yeah. So when that air slows, it doesn't have a pulling power to pull the fuel up from the jet. So that kind of creates a temporary lean condition, and that's where your stab bog comes in. And of course, Honda/Keihin knew that at the time. That's why they redesigned the QA to the QB series and added an Excel pump. Mm-hmm. Kind of give it that little squirt of fuel that gets rid of those stab bog problems.
And that's why that is an upgrade to the QA on a Big Red. Yeah, 300EX is a upgrade for a Big Red, 250SX.
TRX 250.
Yeah. And then a 400EX would be the upgrade for a 350X.
And the 350D.
And the 350D. Makes it a lot easier to start because you can squirt a couple shots of fuel in there before you kick it over.
Yeah, it pretty much eliminates the cold start issue. Yeah. For sure. Especially if it's tuned in properly.
Let's talk about... we talked about that before.
Yeah. So you're going to have two different choke systems in a carburetor. Like in your Big Reds or your 250Rs, you're going to have a choke plunger on a cable. It's not really a choke. It's not choking anything. What it's doing is there's a plunger that opens up and allows what's called an enrichment circuit. And that's what this circuit here is on this carburetor. This is your starter circuit or your enrichment circuit. I don't know, is it catching that? Mm-hmm. All right. And that's the difference between 85 and 86. Your 85s had a pressed-in starter jet on the top here. 86,
that's my favorite. That's my favorite starter jet, the pressed-in starter jet.
In 86, they put a rubber plug where the press-in jet was, and then added a normal screw-in jet on the side. Mm-hmm. So it's an enrichment circuit. So it's physically just adding more fuel as a choke. Then you have what we call, a true mechanical choke, like your 185 and 200s. You've got a butterfly back here that when you pull the choke, it closes or chokes out the back of the carb, forcing as much air as possible through the pilot circuit to get that extra fuel, like a 300, 400EX carb.
So I've never thought about that. I've cleaned a few of these and swapped things out, and I never thought how.
Well, the problem with these, especially in the Big Reds and SXs for some reason, because dirt travels down the cable, so you get real dirty up by the hands, all the dust and dirt. Well, it kind of works its way through the cable sheathing, comes down, and it gets into your plunger here, and it'll cause them to stick. They won't close all the way, or they won't open all the way. Most of the time, they won't close all the way. Then your machine just runs real rich. It's kind of rich and boggy and kind of spongy throttle. That's why personally I prefer. That's what makes the 300 carb upgrade even better, because you eliminate all this possibility of issues. Right. No more junk getting in there and not allowing it to close all the way. You just have a mechanical choke. And of course, a couple pumps on the throttle, and it's physically squirting fuel in there. And another issue is I see constantly. So I had to drill a lot of these out. A lot of them are seized. In 85, they were a solid brass plunger. 86, they cut a groove in the plunger to add an O-ring. That was to help keep the trash from getting into the circuit that's working its way down the cable. The problem with that is the O-ring holds the dirt. There's nowhere for it to go. So it all builds up, corrodes, and that's when you're having to drill those out. So 9 out of 10 of these that I have to heat up and drill out are 86, 87 style planters. So personally, on all my machines, I don't even put the O-ring. I leave that O-ring out of that groove. Because I would rather a little bit of that dirt work through the circuit and hopefully work out than to just get it piled up in here to where.
Do you offer all the components to replace that?
Yeah, we have choke kits available on the website.
Do you have choke cables?
Yeah.
On the website? Awesome. 223cycles.net. That's beautiful.
And of course, we offer the 300EX carbs for the Big Reds, SXs, the 400 carbs, and we set them all up per order. So I look at what the machines had done, if they've modified the airbox or exhaust. Look at their elevation, and I'll jet it and set it all up to where it's as plug and play as much as possible.
Awesome. These don't do anything, right? These little. So you can throw these out.
Well, the intention is good. So these are what's called a main jet baffle. They go around the main jet, and the idea was that if you're in real rough conditions or riding wheelies and that type of stuff, it helps keep a little more fuel around the main jet. Here's the problem with them. They've got some years on them. They got a couple years on them, 2 or 3 or 5 or 20. These get brittle and they don't stay in place. So you put them on here and imagine what they're doing. Come on, well, it's Chinese carb. But you get the idea. They just fall out. They don't really stay in place. So what happens is these come and dislodge hanging around a float bowl, and most of the time they'll hang up the float, causing the machine to flood. So when we restore the carbs, actually this was this guy. Yeah. It's my first time I'm learning. So when we restore them, we really don't put these in there because I'll be honest with you. I ride some of the roughest stuff 99.9% of track riders ride. I've never once ever had an issue, but I also have never had an issue with this hanging up my float either. So, but there are some carbs to where it's a necessary thing, and it's not something you want to leave out. So when we're talking like the HT 250R carb, this PJ carb here, now these have a lot better system and hold in place a whole lot better. These are more important. And then in a lot of your Mikuni carbs, if the main jet basically holds that baffle, it's part of the main jet, you have to have that in there. You don't want to leave it out. So if it's a main jet baffle that just sits on here, you're fine to leave it out. If it's part of the main jet system where it's screwed on, you want to leave that in.
Well, I think that was all we had to cover. Or there's so much more.
I mean, hours and hours.
This was just carb 101.
About volume versus velocity and jetting, and
that was the stuff
really twist some people's heads.
He twisted my head. So makes you think up is down and down is up, and you're looking like a dog at a ceiling fan. So
and where it really comes down is how fast the air's traveling. Pulling power that it has. So that speed and what that pulling power is.
If you want to see a video like that, leave a comment and we'll try to corner Curtie at another location to make that happen. But for right now, I can't stress it enough. Go to 223cycles.net. He's got so many offerings, between JIS screwdrivers to all the carb kits you need, carb restoration work, lines, tubing, brand new carbs if you want to upgrade to a 300EX to a 400EX.
Fork boots, all kinds of fun stuff.
And constantly adding new things like the Big Bubba secondary fuel bottle, auxiliary tank that we talked about in my 250R video.
Tank.
Yep. So those are brand new, and I was one of the first guinea pigs for that. So check that out. Official
R&D.
Yes.
Right here.
Yeah. We made some improvements, so you're welcome. But thank you, Curtie. We appreciate you. He is the man when it comes to carburetors, and the trike world would be a sad place without him. So thank you.
You're welcome,
All right.
sir.
Catch you next time.